Welcome, listener. This is Sebastian Nothwell. A few months back, you may remember hearing the first chapter of the audiobook for my fantasy novel, Oak King, Holly King, read by Gary Furlong. Today I'm here to introduce the second chapter. In the coming weeks, we'll have more author interviews and roundtable discussions, but for now, please enjoy.
Chapter 2. Mortals might lie, Shrike considered, as he stalked away from the Knights Templar's crumbling fortress, but scrying could not. The clerk held the key to his victory. Still, Shrike's return to the mortal realm after several centuries' absence had not proved quite as smooth as he might have hoped. While the acorn guided him through the forest to the grove of gates, stepping into the portal felt like marching against a howling wind. Forcing his way through, Shrike had found himself engulfed in an acrid fog. He stumbled to his knees onto close-cropped grass. His flailing hand braced against a sapling to keep himself upright as he dry-heaved. Iron hung in the air itself. Its heavy ache seemed to fly at him from all directions. In past centuries, this particular passage between the realms had led to the lands belonging to Westminster Abbey. What had happened to the mortal realm since then he could not begin to imagine. But he would find out. Shrike hauled himself upright against the sapling. The rush of falling water mingled with more distant hoofbeats, voices, and metallic clanging in his ears. Glancing round, he found he stood in a copse of trees by a waterfall with a ring of small, pale mushrooms surrounding him. Not a single tree trunk spanned wider than his hand, and he felt certain the river had not existed on his last journey to the site. Yet the acorn drew him away from the river, north and to the east. Shrike staggered through the fog. His strides came surer with every step as he grew used to the fatiguing influence of the surrounding iron. Soon he stumbled on a well-trod footpath amidst the close-cropped grass. Glimpses of changing mortal costume had rippled through the Fey realms in the intervening centuries. Certain courtly Fey had habits of stealing whichever trend struck their fancy, or stealing the mortal tailors themselves, both of which meant Fey attire often became a motley whirlwind of hundreds of years' worth of mortal innovation. While Shrike did not often venture out into Fey society, he had caught a few hints of it amidst the wild hunt, and had thought breeches, stockings, tricorn hats, and flimsy, high-waisted gowns were the latest mortal fashions. Instead, when he encountered the footpath, he found mortals wearing trousers, shawls, and bell-shaped skirts with yards and yards of draping. These mortals appeared no less bemused by his own garb. While some wore capes, none wore cloaks, and nothing as well crafted as Shrike's fur-lined hood or his tall leather boots. Their sheer number proved likewise astonishing. Tens of thousands had walked London streets when last Shrike wandered through the city. The population seemed to have multiplied 1,000-fold since then. Everywhere he turned he beheld mortals wandering to and fro, most on foot, some mounted on horseback, and still others rattling along in chariots. One particular chariot almost ran him down as he strode towards his quest's object. The gelding pulled up short with a shriek and reared, its hooves striking the air inches from his face. The mortal at the reins shook his fist and called Shrike a blackguard. The passengers in voluminous skirts screamed almost as loud as the horse. Shrike touched the brim of his hat and continued on. None of them would bring him his promised victory. That individual lay somewhere further beyond, towards the heart of the city. The acorn guided him northeastward. Shrike followed it in a straight line regardless of paths, plants, or people, which earned him many an odd look, but he cared not. Until it brought him to iron. Shrike halted some 12 feet from the fence. 1,000 iron spears hung suspended from iron bars in a line that stretched from south to north, and on through the fog beyond Shrike's field of vision. While made of iron and standing as tall as his own shoulders, Shrike thought he could climb the fence if he had to, by throwing his cloak over it to shield him from the corrosive metal and taking a running leap if nothing else. Still, it could not run on forever, and so he continued northward, maintaining a wary distance from the fence as he stalked its length. Past an enormous bronze cast of a nude warrior with unsheathed sword and upraised shield, in the furthest northeast corner of the fence he found a 3-fold marble arch, the central passage flanked by smaller twins, and beyond it, London teemed. The central arch stood wide enough for 2 carriages to pass through alongside. Shrike held his breath and walked beneath it. The marble shielded him from the iron fence. A shudder ran through him all the same as he went. Shrike followed his gut feeling down a formerly familiar path towards Temple Bar, where the Knights Templar had once reigned over their own court. The half-timbered inns appeared much the same, though their occupants had changed from knights to clerks, and one clerk in particular Shrike knew, for when he had locked eyes with Lofthouse at last, he felt the warm rush of victory radiating from the acorn throughout his body, and perhaps the warm rush of something else besides. Shrike had no expectations of what might await him in the mortal realm. To find at the end of his quest a mortal man with the enormous, soft, dark eyes of a hunted hart in a shadowed glade, well, that was certainly a surprise, and not an unwelcome one. The eyes alone would have fascinated Shrike. In addition to this, a fine-boned face with nose, chin, and cheekbones honed to a keen edge, and a complexion as speckled as a sparrow's egg, even over the rosebud pink of the lips, all combined to captivate him. The sweep of chestnut hair low over his brow tempted Shrike to brush it out of his eyes and take that noble chin in hand. If he had but passed this delicate face in severe garb on the street, he would have halted his quest to learn more of the man. Fortunate, then, that the quest itself had forced their paths to cross. Then those freckled rosebud lips had opened, and the question that emerged had set Shrike back on his heels. "Your name, sir?" The interruption of the clerk's master allowed Shrike to recover from the shock and realize that, like most mortals, the clerk did not actually demand to know his true name, just to know what he was called. Shrike could offer him that much on their first meeting. He would like to offer him much more anon. At present, however, the clerk had set him on another quest. The Green Man. A good omen, Shrike thought. An aspect of the Oak King and a symbol of summer's triumph over winter. He strode away from Staple Inn with renewed purpose. While the paths running through London had increased in population, the signs hanging above the doors of the edifices he passed had retained a great deal of their medieval origins. A scarlet lion over some thresholds, a white hart over many others, and at length the green-tinged head of a man with ivy spewing from his eyes, ears, and mouth. Shrike entered. While the mortal behind the bar looked askance at his attire, he accepted his coin regardless. Shrike settled in to wait for the sharp-featured, sharp-tongued, fierce little bird wrapped in dark garb, and eagerly looked forward to the opportunity to prove himself worthy of his favour.
"Bless my soul!" cried Mr. Grigsby the instant Wren returned to the office. "Is that your new muse?"
"What?" blurted Wren.
"Forgive me,"
Mr. Grigsby added in a conspiratorial undertone. It seemed he supposed Wren objected to the volume of his words rather than their content.
"I mean only to ask, is he to pose for your next piece? An engraving, perhaps, or dare I hope, a painting? I'm in eagerness to see it, whatever form it may take."
"No." Wren hadn't the heart to tell Mr. Grigsby that he'd given up on his artistic aspirations long ago. Still, he could promise something. "If one of my works is to be exhibited, I shall tell you straight off." Technically, that wasn't a lie, for as he had no intention of submitting any of his works to galleries, he never need tell Mr. Grigsby anything. It seemed to gratify the old gentleman, who gave him a warm smile and returned to his ledger, humming a few tuneless yet cheerful bars. Wren returned to his own work feeling far less sanguine. Butcher, if that was the bizarre stranger's real name, which Wren very much doubted, had set his brain afire. Bad enough if Wren had only glimpsed such a figure in a crowded street or a shadowed alley. To have spoken to him, however, and found his speech and manner as medieval as his garb, all this aroused Wren's suspicions, as well as his interest. Checking to make sure Mr. Grigsby wasn't watching him, which he never was, but Wren preferred not to leave matters to chance. He slipped his memorandum book out of his desk and jotted down a description of the whole encounter in shorthand. Certain details, like smouldering black eyes and high cheekbones, may have taken precedence over others. No matter. Whether or not anything came of their crossing paths in reality, he would make something of it in pencil, ink, or paint. Then, with the riddle of Butcher set down in black and white, Wren attempted to solve it. There were few reasons Wren could think of why anyone, much less such a Gothic figure as Butcher, would accost him at his place of work. Money motivated most things in Wren's experience. Yet as a clerk taking in not more than 40 shillings a week, he had none, at least not enough to make it worth anyone else's trouble.
Nor did he have any debts which might provoke a moneylender to send out a large and imposing figure to intimidate Wren into paying. Perhaps Mr. Grigsby did have the right notion, in his own way. Perhaps this butcher was no hired brute, but a hired model, or, more likely, a hired actor. The more Wren reflected on this possibility, the more plausible it seemed. While he didn't have mortal enemies, there remained a certain coterie in the city who might consider him a sort of professional nemesis. Though they didn't want Wren dead, probably, they would delight to see him humiliated in his office. Furthermore, this certain coterie was the precise sort of people who would hire the queerest possible actor to do the job. Except Butcher had proved a touch too queer. A great deal of craftsmanship had gone into his costume, expensive craftsmanship at that, full of little details, all in black and with such fine tooling on the leather mask that would not read well from the stage. Nothing in it matched any role performed in the city at present. Medieval pageantry was not in current dramatic fashion. So it would have to be especially made, and that would cost a great deal more coin than Wren believed a certain coterie had at their disposal. Unless they had found themselves fortunate enough to make the acquaintance of an eccentric aristocrat, who already had such a costume to hand, mouldering away in some ancestral cedar chest. Wren had one secret, of course, and while he'd never breathed a word of it to any living soul, save the other individual involved, one person had discovered it quite by accident, and there remained a few others out in the world who might have guessed it. And given this particular secret and those who knew of it, 2 of the 3 possibilities remained the same. Blackmail, for those who suspected the secret had the habit of spending more money than they earned. Or humiliation, as those who suspected the secret found obscure pranks particularly amusing, and would think it a grand lark to hire an actor to tease the secret out of Wren. Out of the 2, Wren thought the second, a humiliating prank, the most plausible. Because if so, the suspected parties couldn't have chosen a more promising actor to carry out their plan. Whether they knew it or not, this butcher, bizarre as he behaved, had precisely the sort of countenance, form, and figure that would most tempt Wren to reveal his secret. All this meant that, after 10 hours spent puzzling over the mysterious butcher, Wren had no more idea of what to expect at the Green Man than when he'd begun. When the clock over the mantel struck 7:30, Mr. Grigsby rose, stretched, and, as he did every evening, invited Wren to join him at the inn across the way for dinner. And like every evening before, Wren demurred. Mr. Grigsby never took any offence at this. He had long ago supposed Wren preferred to dine with his artistic and literary peers, and for many years his supposition proved correct. Though the circumstances had changed, Wren saw no need to correct Mr. Grigsby's assumptions. Regardless of the reason, the outcome remained the same. Mr. Grigsby invited Wren to join him for dinner. Wren declined. Mr. Grigsby bid him good night and departed for the evening. Wren stayed to finish what work he could before going to bed himself in the garret above the office in Mr. Grigsby's own chambers. Tonight, however, at 7:45, Wren donned his coat, locked up the office, and strode out into the night. A long, cold walk ensued over the cobblestones until he reached the hanging sign of a man's face overgrown with ivy. Wren braced himself before the green-painted door, and with a sigh shoved his way into the bright, bubbling chaos of scores of clerks making up for 12 hours of absolute boredom. The noise of their excitement assaulted Wren's ears like a trumpet blast. A cluster nearest the fire had broken out in popular comic song, which one of them had heard at a music hall. This young man stood on an ottoman to direct his fellows in following along his half-remembered lyrics. A still larger circle of clerks had gathered around this mess to laugh at the spectacle. The remainder, not directly involved in the musical review, had all their own jests, gossip, and arguments to distract them, each raising his voice above the general noise to make himself heard, and thus each voice raising the general noise by exponential degrees. The resulting cacophony would have turned Wren right around and sent him out into the night again had he not determined himself to meet the enigmatic butcher. So he nudged, pardoned, and surreptitiously elbowed his way through the throng. His black frock coat, a dark speck of ink in the roiling tide of more fashionable orange, green, crimson, and pink waistcoats, neckties, and gloves of his fellow clerks. It occurred to Wren as he stepped away from the bar with a cup of coffee in either hand and searched the crowd in vain for anything like medieval garb, that convincing him to wait in a coffee-house all night for a mysterious stranger who never arrived might, in and of itself, pass for a prank. A wise man, having recognized this, would no doubt cease his fruitless hunt and fight his way out of the Green Man the same way he'd come in. Yet Wren also recalled the high cheekbones, hawkish nose, and haunting dark eyes of the imposing figure who'd appeared in his office as if summoned by Wren's wishful imaginings of something or someone to carry him away from the ceaseless drudgery of his own life. Wren supposed he'd never been a wise man. "Lofthouse!" Wren flinched and whipped his head round. The voice, its low growl cutting through the noisy cheer of the crowd, had spoken his surname directly into his ear. He looked over the heads of the assembled clerks where he expected to see a particular long and brooding face rising above the throng, but beheld no sign of the speaker. "Down here," the voice growled again. Wren glanced down and discovered a rough-hewn table tucked away in the back corner, not more than 2 feet from his own left elbow. This position left it quite out of reach of the candles overhead and the merry flickering of the hearth fire surrounded by armchairs full of clerks further off, and cast the whole corner into shadow. Yet the shadow seemed deeper than it ought, as if it absorbed all light attempting to breach it, and in this fathomless shadow sat a hooded figure no less imposing for his hunched posture. "Butcher," Wren said, setting the coffee cups on the table and pulling out a chair to join him. As soon as Wren sat down, Butcher threw back his hood. He wore no mask this time. Wren supposed the proprietor of the Green Man wouldn't have allowed it. He appreciated Butcher's flair for the dramatique, regardless. Likewise, Wren appreciated how the clerks nearest to their table cast nervous looks at Butcher, further confirmation that neither Butcher himself nor his bizarre attire were figments of Wren's imagination. And for once, Wren was not the weirdest figure in the room, though no doubt sharing a table with Butcher would mark him out for life. Still, Wren hadn't noticed any members of the restive quills amidst the crowd, and the noise of the clerks' revels would cover up his conversation with Butcher better than the curious muffled silence in the fog of Staple Inn. Wren handed one of the coffee cups off to Butcher, who accepted it with a solemn nod. "A toast." Butcher raised his cup a hair's breadth. "To the good health of your king." "Queen," Wren corrected him. Butcher's brows knit together, then his expression cleared. "Of course. Elizabeth, forgive me, I had forgotten." Wren opened his mouth, thought better of it, and sipped his bracingly bitter coffee. Butcher, meanwhile, quaffed the whole piping hot cup as if it were water. "And now to our purpose." Wren, who'd found it difficult to tear his eyes away from Butcher's throat as he swallowed, forced himself to meet that dark gaze once again. "And what is our purpose exactly?" "To defeat the Holly King, now and forevermore." Wren blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "The Queen of the Court of the Silver Wheel has chosen me as her Oak King," said Butcher, which did nothing to dispel Wren's confusion. "I must slay the Holly King on the winter solstice. The Queen will appoint another Holly King in his place, who must slay me on the summer solstice. And so the silver wheel continues turning." Wren stared at him. If he'd had any doubts as to who'd hired Butcher before, they vanished now. The medieval details and chivalrous themes of Butcher's speech were obvious allusions to his own interests which only the rest of Quills knew of, and knew well at that, and had made no secret of their own impatience with Wren's treatment of such themes. He had to admire Butcher's talent, for he not only had his lines down by heart, but spoke them as if he truly believed every word. What a wonder he must appear on the stage. Wren wished he might see him as Hotspur, or Tybalt, or Hamlet. Perhaps after the rest of Quills had finished their laugh at his expense, Wren could wring his professional name from him and witness his work under the limelight. Butcher leaned in, his dark eyes burning into Wren's like twin coals. "I do not intend to die on the summer solstice." "Nor do I," Wren replied. Butcher smiled as if Wren had said something both sensible and agreeable, rather than blurting out the first words which came to mind. Wren found he rather liked that smile. More the pity, then, that Butcher merely played a part. "I intend to slay the new-crowned Holly King, and every one of his successors, for all the coming centuries." "That's all well and good," said Wren, "but I don't see what any of it has to do with me." Butcher furrowed his brow again. "Don't you?" "No, I don't," Wren insisted. "Do explain." Butcher looked at him a moment longer, then stared across the room into the fire and scratched the scar on his cheek in thought. Wren watched him with a mixture of idle aesthetic appreciation and practical impatience, at least until he recalled that not 12 hours hence Butcher's scar had been a wound. Yet even as he stared in wonder, Wren realized his mistake. The wound of that morning had been mere drippings of wax, which skillful fingers had arranged to look like broken skin. Actors on the stage often employed such tricks. Now, so much later in the day, the wax had fallen off for the most part, and only the faint red streaks of irritated skin remained. Butcher's rumbling voice broke through Wren's thoughts. "I don't know either." "What?" said Wren stupidly. "I don't know what purpose you will serve in my quest. But," Butcher added, with a wry half-smile that made Wren's heart perform curious acrobatics, "I intend to find out." "If you don't know how I fit into your quest," Wren said, forcing himself to pronounce the word with extreme skepticism, "what makes you believe I'm part of it at all?" "Because the fates have said so," Butcher replied, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "And pray tell, how do the fates speak to you? Through ritual? What, scattering bird entrails across the cobblestones? Or do you inhale mystical vapours and babble prophecy in a stupor?" "I made a pendulum of an acorn," said Butcher, "and ate it." Wren stared at him. Butcher did not elaborate, nor did he seem in any way discomfited by Wren's continued skepticism. As much as Wren enjoyed staring into so handsome a face, he didn't want the evening to come down to a mere staring contest. He cleared his throat. "Well, you've certainly learned your book by rote, and your continued improvisation on it is commendable, but you really can't expect me to believe any of this. Not without some proof, at least." Butcher served him a blank look. Then, catching Wren's eye to be sure he followed the motion, he raised both hands to either side of his head and tucked his hair behind his ears. Prior to this moment, his raven locks had flowed down as straight and dark as ink poured from the bottle, shot through with strands of molten silver. The loose gather at the nape of his neck allowed for this remarkable hair to cover his ears. The shape of these, Wren had taken for granted, resembled his and those of other men. Now, Wren's eyes widened as he beheld a pair of ears as pointed as arrowheads. Even as he gawked, however, he had a rational explanation to hand. Startling and remarkable craftsmanship, yes, but mere waxwork, just like the wound-turned scar, and no doubt if he reached out and touched them, they would crumble beneath his fingertips. Wren resisted the urge to do just that, and instead replied, "You say your ritual brought you to me. Magic, I presume?" "Aye," said Butcher. "Why don't you show me some more of your magic, then? Go on." Wren gestured to the table between them. "Do a spell." For the first time since they'd met, Butcher appeared almost offended. "I'm a sellsword, not a witch." "Yet you performed a spell to find me," Wren countered. "Do you deny it?" "I deny nothing," said Butcher. "But the pendulum ritual, it's the simplest trick. Every hunter knows it. Thought you said you were a sellsword. I am a knave, and thus of all trades." The wry half-smile returned to Butcher's lips. "Though I excel in the hunt." Wren, who'd begun to feel rather hunted himself, swallowed hard. "Right. Well," he said, rising from his chair. "Until you have some magic to show me, I'm afraid your hunt is at an end." Butcher watched him stand with a touch of alarm and a great deal more interest. "So be it. I know where to find you." His eyes lingered on Wren's ink-stained fingertips, his blue-veined wrists protruding from his shirt-sleeves, and the death's head pin on the black neckcloth tied beneath his throat. Wren felt the colour rise in his cheeks. If Butcher had demanded to meet him in another sort of establishment, who could tell where their encounter might have led? Alas, in the Green Man, they could have nothing. And so Wren's secret remained safe, though it stuck in his craw. "Give my regards to the restive quills," Wren said, with more confidence than he felt, and threw himself into the crowd without looking back.
Sebastian Nothwell here again. This has been the second chapter of my faromantasy novel, Oak King, Holly King, read by Gary Furlong. If you enjoyed this sample, you can find the full audiobook wherever you get your favorite books. We look forward to sharing more podcast episodes with you soon, including roundtable discussions and author interviews. And as always, thank you for listening.